The gunshot that saved her life came from her own hand. They called her worthless, a burden, meat no man would touch. They laughed when the bid stayed low, when the auctioneer's voice cracked with disgust. But the mountain man who bought her that frozen morning saw something the town missed, a woman who refused to break. What followed wasn't salvation. It was war. Blood in the snow, fire that ate the night. And when her past came hunting, she didn't hide, she destroyed it. This is her story. Stay until the end. Hit like and comment your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The wind off the mountains cut through Ash Creek like a blade through rotted cloth. It was the kind of cold that made your teeth ache, that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground. The town sat ugly and sprawling in a valley that didn't want it, wood and mud and desperation clinging to existence one brutal winter at a time. Mara couldn't see any of it. The burlap sack over her head smelled like old grain and something fouler, maybe blood, maybe just years of other people's fear. Her wrists were bound behind her back with rope that had already worn the skin raw. She could feel the wagon bed beneath her knees, rough planks that jolted with every rut in the frozen street. The voices came in waves. Look at the size of her. Christ, what's she weigh, 200 pounds? More. Look how the wagon sits. Laughter, always laughter. It rolled over her like dirty water. Mara kept her breathing steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth, a trick she'd learned years ago when panic tried to take hold, when Silas would come home drunk and angry, when the cellar door would slam shut and the darkness would press in. Don't think about him. Not now. The wagon lurched to a stop. Someone grabbed her arm, rough hands, impatient, and hauled her upright. Her knees screamed. She'd been kneeling for over an hour while they paraded her through town like livestock. Gentlemen? The voice was nasal, performative. The auctioneer. We come now to our final item of the day. Female, 25 years of age. Healthy enough, I suppose, though as you can see she's substantial. More laughter. Someone whistled, low and mocking. She got teeth? A man called out. She got anything useful? Another added. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Well now, I can't speak to her particular skills. She was brought in from a homestead out past Ridge Valley. Previous owner claims she ran off, abandoned her duties. Make of that what you will. Liar. The word burned in Mara's throat, but she swallowed it down. Silas Rourke wasn't her owner. He was her jailer, her torturer. The man who'd bought her from her own father when she was 19 and kept her locked in a basement for 6 years. She'd escaped 4 months ago, thought she'd made it far enough. Thought wrong. Let's start the bidding at, let's say $5. Silence. Wind rattled through the street, kicking up dust that Mara couldn't see but could taste through the rough weave of the sack. Come now, gentlemen, $5 for a woman of childbearing age? Childbearing? Someone spat. You'd need a damn ox to mount that one. The laughter was uglier now, crueler. Mara felt her face burn beneath the hood, felt something old and familiar trying to curl up inside her chest. Shame. The kind that made you want to disappear, to become small enough that the world forgot you existed. But she didn't curl, didn't flinch. She'd survived Silas Rourke's basement. She'd survived the escape through 40 miles of wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back and a stolen knife. She'd survived every single day of her life that had tried to break her. She could survive this. $3, the auctioneer said, voice deflating. Surely someone... $2. The voice cut through the crowd, flat and uninterested, male, deep. It didn't sound cruel exactly, just transactional. We have $2. Do I hear? $2.50, another man called. But only if she can cook. Can you cook, girl? The auctioneer yanked the sack up just enough for Mara to speak, cold air rushing against her mouth. Yes. Her voice came out steady, stronger than she felt. There you have it. $2.50. Do I hear 3? $10. The crowd went quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. Mara couldn't see who'd spoken, but she felt the shift in the air, felt the way the other men stepped back, the way their laughter died. $10. The auctioneer's voice cracked with something like relief. Well now, that's more like it. Do I hear 11? No, you don't. The voice again, closer now. Take the money and get this done." There was a long pause. Mara heard coins clink, heard the auctioneer murmur something she couldn't catch. Then hands were on her again, different hands, these ones careful, guiding her down from the wagon. Her feet hit frozen ground and she stumbled. The hands steadied her, patient. "Can you walk?" the voice asked. It was right beside her now. "Yes." "Then walk." He didn't pull her, didn't direct, just started moving, and Mara followed because staying in that street with those men seemed worse than following a stranger into the unknown. They walked for what felt like 10 minutes. Mara counted her steps, focused on the sound of boots crunching through ice and mud. The stranger's footsteps were measured, unhurried. He didn't speak, didn't explain. Finally, they stopped. She heard a door creak open, felt warmer air, relatively warmer, wash over her face. Inside. Mara stepped forward into darkness she couldn't see, heard the door close behind her. For a moment, panic flared hot in her chest. Trapped. Confined. The cellar. "I'm going to cut your hands free," the voice said. "Then you can take that hood off yourself. Don't try to run. You won't make it 10 yards in this cold without proper gear." She felt the knife before she saw it, cold metal sliding between her wrists, the rope falling away in one clean cut. Her shoulders screamed as she brought her arms forward for the first time in hours. Slowly, Mara pulled the burlap sack off her head. The room came into focus in pieces. Small, dim. A single oil lamp burning on a rough wooden table. Walls made of logs, chinked with mud and moss. A potbelly stove in the corner throwing off heat that made her skin prickle. And the man. He stood near the door watching her. Tall. Maybe 6'2". Broad through the shoulders in a way that came from work, not vanity. His face was hard angles and old scars, a jaw dark with several days' beard. Hair the color of dried tobacco, long enough to tie back but loose now, falling past his collar. His eyes were the color of winter sky, pale, cold, unreadable. He wore clothes that had seen real use. Wool coat patched at the elbows, canvas pants tucked into worn boots, a knife on his belt that looked like it had gutted more than its share of animals. Mountainman, Mara thought. Hunter. The kind who spent more time alone than with people. "You got a name?" he asked. "Mara." She didn't give him the rest, didn't owe him that. "Mara." He said it once, like he was testing the weight of it. "I'm Gideon Cross. This is my supply room, cabin's 2 days' ride up the mountain." Mara looked around the space properly now. Shelves lined with goods, flour, salt, coffee, ammunition, traps hanging on hooks, pelts stacked in the corner, waiting to be sold. This wasn't a home. This was a way station. Why? The word came out before she could stop it. Gideon's expression didn't change. Why what? Why did you... She gestured vaguely, unable to find words for the absurdity of it all. $10. You didn't even look at me. Didn't need to. That doesn't answer. I need help at the cabin, Gideon said, matter of fact. Winter's coming hard and I can't be in 2 places at once. You can cook. That's more useful than most of those idiots back there. Mara stared at him. You bought me to cook. I bought you so you wouldn't get sold to someone worse. His eyes held hers, steady and unflinching. The man bidding against me was Curtis Lang. He runs a brothel on the edge of town. Girls who end up there don't last long. The air went out of Mara's lungs. She'd heard stories about Lang's place. Everyone had. So I'm what? She heard herself say. Your charity case? You're someone who's going to work for her keep, Gideon said flatly. I don't do charity. I do trade. You cook, clean, help me get through winter. Come spring, you can leave if you want. I won't stop you. And if I want to leave now? He tilted his head slightly. You know what's out there. How far did you make it on your own before someone caught you? Mara's jaw tightened. Not far enough. Gideon crossed to the shelves and pulled down a thick wool coat, tossed it to her. We leave at first light, 2 days on horseback, weather permitting. You'll need warmer clothes. There's a trunk in the corner. Take what fits. He moved toward the door. Wait. Mara's voice stopped him. You don't know anything about me. I could be dangerous. I could be... You stood on that wagon for over an hour with a hood on your head and didn't break, Gideon said, turning back to face her. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. Most people would have. That tells me you're stronger than you look. Strong enough to survive where I live. You don't know what I've survived. Don't need to. He opened the door, cold air spilling in. Past doesn't matter up there. Only thing that matters is whether you can make it through today, then tomorrow, then the next day. He stepped out into the frozen street. Get some rest. Morning comes early. The door closed behind him, and Mara was alone. She stood in the center of the small room, still holding the wool coat he'd thrown her, and felt something strange uncurl in her chest. Not hope, she'd learned better than that. But something close to it. Something that felt like possibility. She crossed to the trunk and opened it. Inside were men's clothes, mostly, canvas pants, flannel shirts, woolen socks. At the bottom, she found a woman's dress, plain and practical, and a pair of boots that looked like they might fit. Mara pulled out the clothes and laid them on the table. Her wrists were still raw from the rope, her knees bruised from kneeling on the wagon bed. She was exhausted, terrified. Every instinct screamed that this was another trap, another cage. But Gideon Cross hadn't looked at her like the men in the street hadn't weighed her worth in pounds of flesh or potential suffering. He'd looked at her like she was a problem to solve, a tool to acquire. Mara could work with that. She'd been a tool before. At least this time she might get something out of it. She changed into the warmer clothes. The dress was too small, but the pants and flannel shirt fit well enough, and pulled on the boots. Then she sat at the table and waited for dawn. Sleep didn't come. Every sound outside made her flinch. Footsteps, voices, the creak of wagon wheels. She kept expecting Silas to crash through the door, to drag her back to the basement where she belonged. But he didn't come. No one did. As the first gray light of dawn crept through the cracks in the walls, the door opened. Gideon stood silhouetted against the morning, breath misting in the cold. Time to go. Mara stood, pulled on the wool coat, and followed him out into the frozen street. 2 horses waited outside, already saddled and packed. Gideon swung onto the larger one, a bay gelding with a scarred shoulder, and gestured to the smaller chestnut mare. You ride? Not well. You'll learn. He turned the bay north, toward the mountains that loomed dark and jagged against the pale sky. Mara climbed onto the mare, awkward and graceless, and grabbed the saddle horn with both hands. The horse shifted beneath her, patient. They rode out of Ash Creek as the town began to wake. Mara didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing. The first day was agony. Mara's thighs screamed within an hour. Her back went stiff by noon, and by the time Gideon finally called a halt for the night, she could barely stand. He made camp with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, fire built, horses tended, bedrolls laid out, all while Mara collapsed against a fallen log and tried not to vomit from exhaustion. Eat. Gideon handed her a piece of dried meat and a canteen of water. Mara forced herself to chew. It tasted like leather and salt. You did better than I expected, Gideon said, crouching by the fire. I fell off twice. Only twice. He almost smiled. Almost. They ate in silence. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the darkness, something howled, distant, mournful. Wolves? Mara asked. Probably. They won't come near the fire. She pulled the wool coat tighter around her shoulders. The temperature had dropped with the sun, and now the cold felt like a living thing, pressing in from all sides. You lived up here long? She asked, surprised by her own curiosity. 5 years, give or take. Alone? Mostly. Why? Gideon poked at the fire with a stick, sent sparks spiraling up into the darkness. Got tired of people. Mara understood that. What do you hunt? Elk, deer, bear when I can find them. Fox, marten, anything with a pelt worth selling. He glanced at her. You ask a lot of questions. Is that a problem? Not yet. They lapsed back into silence. Mara studied him across the fire, the way he moved, economical and sure. The way his eyes never stopped scanning the darkness beyond the light. This was a man who'd learned to live with danger, to expect it. You ever kill anyone?
The question slipped out before she could stop it. Gideon's eyes found hers, sharp and assessing. Yes. How many? Enough to know I don't like it. He stood, tossed more wood on the fire. Get some sleep.
We've got another full day tomorrow, and the terrain only gets worse from here. He walked to his bedroll and lay down, back to the fire, and within minutes, his breathing had slowed into the rhythm of sleep. Mara stayed sitting, watching the flames dance. Her body hurt everywhere. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer, but for the first time in 6 years, she wasn't locked in a basement, wasn't chained to a wall, wasn't waiting for the sound of boots on the stairs. She was on a mountain, riding toward an uncertain future with a stranger who'd bought her for the price of 2 decent pelts. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was movement, forward, away from Silas, away from Ash Creek, and the men who'd looked at her like she was garbage. Mara lay down on her own bedroll and stared up at the stars. They were brighter here, away from the town, thousands of them, scattered across the black like salt on velvet. She didn't pray, didn't hope, just closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. The second day was worse. They climbed higher, the trail narrowing to little more than a scratch on the mountainside. Snow appeared in patches, then in drifts, then in a solid white blanket that made the horses labor with every step. Mara's hands went numb despite the gloves Gideon had given her. Her face felt like frozen leather. The mare stumbled twice, and both times Mara's heart stopped, certain they were going over the edge. But the horse found her footing, kept climbing. Late afternoon, they crested a ridge and Gideon pulled up short. There. Mara followed his gaze and saw it. A cabin tucked into a clearing maybe a quarter-mile ahead. It was larger than she'd expected, built solid from thick logs with a stone chimney that rose like a fist against the sky. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone had been here recently. You live alone, Mara said slowly. But there's smoke. Slow-burn stove, Gideon said. Keeps the place from freezing while I'm gone. I built it myself. They rode down into the clearing. Up close, the cabin looked even more substantial. Thick walls, shuttered windows, a door reinforced with iron straps. This wasn't a seasonal shelter. This was a fortress. Gideon dismounted and led the bay to a small barn set back from the main building. Mara slid off the mare, less fell than dismounted, and followed on shaking legs. Inside, the barn was warm and dry. 2 more horses stood in stalls along with supplies stacked neatly against the walls. Gideon unsaddled both horses, worked with the calm efficiency she was starting to recognize as his default state. Tend to your horse, he said. Brush her down, check her hooves. She carried you this far. Least you can do is make sure she's fed and watered. Mara had never tended a horse in her life, but she watched what Gideon did and copied it as best she could. The mare stood patient while Mara fumbled with the brush, picking out bits of ice and dirt from her coat. When both horses were settled, Gideon led her to the cabin. The door swung open and warmth rushed out, real warmth, the kind that made Mara's frozen skin burn as blood rushed back to the surface. She stepped inside and stopped. The cabin was one large room with a sleeping loft above. The floor was rough-hewn planks, worn smooth by use. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, the slow-burn stove Gideon had mentioned glowing red in its belly. There was a table, chairs, shelves lined with supplies, tools hanging on hooks, furs piled in one corner. It smelled like wood smoke and leather, and something else, wild, untamed, like the mountain itself had been brought inside and tamed just enough to live with. This is home, Gideon said. Your quarters are up there. He pointed to the loft. Mine are down here. There's a root cellar through that door, and the privy's out back. Water comes from a spring about 50 yards east. You'll need to haul it every morning. Mara nodded, trying to take it all in. Gideon crossed to the stove and added more wood. I'm going to check the trap line before dark. While I'm gone, you can inventory the food stores. Need to know what we're working with for winter. He pulled on a heavier coat, grabbed a rifle from above the door, and walked out without another word. Mara stood alone in the cabin and felt the silence press in. It was different from the silence of the basement. No darkness here, no sense of walls closing in. This was open silence, wild silence. She moved to the shelves and began taking stock. Flour, maybe 30 pounds. Salt, sugar, coffee. Dried beans in clay jars. Smoked meat hanging from hooks in the rafters, preserved vegetables in sealed tins. It was more food than Mara had seen in one place in years. She worked methodically, counting and cataloging, her mind falling into the familiar rhythm of inventory. This she understood. This made sense. By the time Gideon returned, full dark had fallen, and Mara had a fire going in the main fireplace, water boiling in a pot suspended over the flames. Gideon looked at her, then at the fire, then back at her. "You make that?" "You said I could cook. Figured I should start proving it." He almost smiled again. Set the rifle down and hung his coat on a peg. "What are we having?" "Stew. It'll be thin tonight. Didn't want to use too much until I know what we need to save." Smart. They ate the stew in silence. It wasn't much. Beans, dried meat, a few preserved carrots, but it was hot and filling. Gideon finished his bowl and got up for seconds without asking permission. "This is good," he said. Not a compliment exactly, just a statement of fact. "It's passable." "Better than passable." He set his empty bowl in a bucket near the door. "I haven't had a decent meal in months. Last woman who tried to help me lasted 2 weeks before she ran back down the mountain. Said the isolation was making her crazy." "Was it?" "Probably, but she wasn't much use anyway. Couldn't cook, couldn't hunt, couldn't do much of anything except complain." Mara studied him across the table. "And you think I'll be different?" "You're still here, aren't you?" "I've been here 4 hours." "Most people don't make it past the first night." Gideon stood, stretched. "I'm going to bed. You should too. Tomorrow we start real work." He disappeared into the corner where his bedroll was laid out, and within minutes his breathing slowed into sleep. Mara climbed the ladder to the loft. It was small but well made. A mattress stuffed with pine needles, blankets that smelled like cedar, a small window that looked out over the clearing. She lay down and stared at the ceiling beams. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Snow began to fall. She could hear it whispering against the roof. This was her life now. A cabin on a mountain with a man she didn't know. No locks on the doors, no chains on her wrists. It should have terrified her. Instead, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in 6 years. She felt almost safe. The first week nearly killed her. Not the cold, though that was bad enough. Not the isolation, though the silence pressed in like water at the bottom of a well. What nearly broke Mara was the sheer relentless grind of survival at altitude. She woke before dawn every morning to haul water from the spring, the buckets so heavy her shoulders shook by the time she made it back to the cabin. The path was slick with ice, and twice she fell, water soaking through her clothes, cold so fierce it made her gasp. Gideon never helped, just watched from the doorway with his coffee and waited to see if she'd quit. She didn't quit. After water came breakfast, always the same, beans and salt pork and coffee so strong it tasted like regret. Then Gideon would leave to check his trap lines and Mara would start the real work. Chopping wood, mending clothes, reinforcing the cabin's chinking where wind whistled through gaps in the logs. Her hands blistered, bled, calloused over. At night she collapsed into the loft and slept like the dead. By the end of that first week, something shifted. The buckets felt lighter. Her feet found purchase on ice that would have dumped her days before. She stopped flinching every time Gideon moved too fast or spoke too sharp. On the 8th morning, she woke to find him standing at the base of the ladder, looking up at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Get dressed," he said. "I'm taking you on the trap line." Mara climbed down, pulled on her boots. "Why?" "Because if something happens to me, you need to know how to survive up here alone." He handed her a rifle, smaller than his, lighter. "You ever shoot?" "Once? Once isn't enough." He moved to the door. "Come on." They walked into the pre-dawn darkness, snow crunching under their boots. The cold bit hard and mean, turning Mara's breath to crystals in the air. Gideon moved like smoke through the trees, barely making a sound. She crashed along behind him like a wounded elk. The first trap was empty. So was the second. At the third, Gideon crouched low and pointed. "See that?" Mara looked where he indicated. A marten, small and dark-furred, caught by the leg. It wasn't dead. It thrashed weakly, eyes rolling white with terror. "You have to kill it," Gideon said. "Quick and clean. Anything else is cruelty." He handed her a heavy stick, stepped back. Mara stared at the trapped animal. Its chest heaved, Blood matted the fur around the steel jaws. Something in her chest twisted hard. I can't. You can. Gideon's voice was flat. You just don't want to. It's suffering, which is why you need to end it. Standing there feeling bad doesn't help the animal, just makes you feel better about yourself. Mara's hands shook. She raised the stick. The marten looked at her. She brought the stick down hard, felt the impact shudder up her arms. The animal went still. Mara dropped the stick and walked 10 paces into the trees before she vomited into the snow. Gideon didn't comment. Just reset the trap, skinned the marten with quick, efficient cuts, and moved to the next site. By midday, they'd checked 20 traps. Mara had killed 3 more animals, 2 marten and a fox. Each time got marginally easier, which somehow made it worse. They stopped to rest near a frozen stream. Gideon built a small fire, melted snow for water. They ate dried meat in silence. You did good, he finally said. I threw up twice. I threw up 5 times my first season. He poked at the fire. Doesn't make you weak, makes you human. Mara studied him across the flames. You don't seem human sometimes. I'm not anymore. He said it matter of fact, like he was commenting on the weather. Live up here long enough, you start to forget what that feels like, being part of the world down there. Is that why you stayed? To forget? Gideon's jaw tightened. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, I stayed because down there I was good at one thing, killing. Army wanted that skill, paid me for it, sent me places where killing was expected, encouraged, rewarded. He fell silent. The fire crackled. When the war ended, they didn't need me anymore. Turned out killing was the only thing I knew how to do, so I came up here where the only things I have to kill are animals, and at least that serves a purpose. Mara absorbed this. What war? Doesn't matter, they're all the same. He stood, kicked snow over the fire. We should head back. Storm's coming. Mara looked up. The sky was still clear, winter bright. I don't see... You will, in about 3 hours. Gideon shouldered his pack. Move. They made it back to the cabin with maybe 20 minutes to spare. The sky went from blue to gray to black so fast it felt like a curtain dropping. Wind rose from nothing to a howl that shook the shutters. Snow came sideways, thick and blinding. Inside, Mara fed the stove while Gideon secured the barn. When he came back, his beard was caked with ice, his coat white with accumulation. Horses are fine, he said, shaking off snow. Storm will blow through by morning. It didn't. The blizzard lasted 3 days. The wind screamed like something alive and furious. Snow piled against the cabin walls until the windows were half buried. The world outside disappeared into white static. Mara and Gideon existed in the small bubble of warmth around the stove, rationing firewood, eating sparingly. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. On the second day, Mara woke from a restless sleep to find Gideon staring at the scar on her arm. She'd pushed up her sleeve to stoke the fire and forgotten to pull it back down. What happened? He asked. Mara tugged the sleeve down. Nothing. That's not nothing. That's a brand. She said nothing. The fire popped, sent sparks up the chimney. The man you ran from, Gideon said slowly. He do that? Does it matter? Might, if he comes looking. Mara's blood went cold. He won't find me. Can't find me. You sure about that? Because you got bought at public auction in a town with 50 witnesses. Anyone asks around, they'll hear about the mountainman who paid $10 for a woman nobody wanted. Trail leads right here. He doesn't know I was in Ash Creek. I covered my tracks. I was careful. Careful isn't the same as invisible. Gideon leaned back in his chair. If someone's looking hard enough, they'll find you. Question is what we do when they show up. We? Mara laughed, sharp and bitter. This isn't your problem. When he comes, if he comes, I'll deal with it. You'll deal with it. Gideon's tone was skeptical. You can barely shoot straight, and you threw up killing a marten. What exactly is your plan? I don't know yet. The words came out louder than she intended. I don't know. All right? I just know I'm not going back. I'd rather die up here than go back to him. Silence settled heavy between them. Outside, the wind shrieked. What's his name? Gideon asked quietly. Mara closed her eyes. Saying it out loud felt like summoning a demon. Silas Rourke. Rourke. Gideon frowned. He run cattle out past Ridge Valley? You know him? Know of him. Traded pelts in that area a few years back. Heard stories. None of them good. His eyes found hers. He's the one who branded you? Mara nodded. Her throat felt tight. He'd do worse than that? She nodded again. Couldn't speak. Gideon stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the wall of white. When he comes, he said, we'll be ready. You don't have to eat. Yeah, I do. He turned to face her. I bought you. Far as the law is concerned, that makes you my responsibility, and I don't let people take what's mine. Something in Mara's chest cracked open. Not hope. She still didn't trust hope. But something close. Something that felt like alliance. Why are you helping me? She whispered. Gideon was quiet for a long time. Then, because 6 years ago, I watched a woman get beaten to death in an alley in St. Louis. 5 men stood around and watched. I was one of them. We all had our reasons for not stepping in. Mine was I'd just gotten out of the army, and I was drunk, and I didn't want trouble. He paused. I can still hear her screaming. Every night when I close my eyes, I hear it. I can't undo that. Can't bring her back. But I can make damn sure I never stand by and watch again. Mara stared at him. This hard, quiet man who'd killed for money, who'd come to the mountains to forget being human. Who was maybe, possibly, still human after all. Thank you, she said. Gideon nodded once, curt. Get some rest. Storm should break by morning, and we've got a lot of work to do. He was right. The storm blew itself out overnight, and they woke to a world transformed. Snow had drifted 6 feet high in places, buried the lower half of the cabin completely. It took them half a day just to dig out the door. The next 2 weeks fell into a new rhythm. Gideon taught Mara to shoot properly, not just point and pull the trigger, but breathe, aim, squeeze. They practiced every afternoon until her shoulder was one big bruise from the rifle's kick. She got better. Not good, but better. He taught her to read tracks in the snow, to tell deer from elk, predator from prey. Showed her which plants could be eaten and which would kill you if you chewed the wrong part. How to start a fire with wet wood. How to skin an animal without ruining the pelt. In return, Mara transformed the cabin. She cleaned and organized with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent years making order out of chaos. She cooked meals that actually tasted like food instead of survival. She sewed and mended, reinforced and repaired. One evening, Gideon came in from checking the horses to find the cabin warm and smelling like fresh bread. Actual bread, risen and baked in the Dutch oven. He stopped in the doorway and just stared. You made bread, he said. I made bread. Mara cut him a thick slice, still steaming. Try it. He took a bite. His eyes closed. Christ. Good? Better than good? How did you... We don't have yeast. Made a starter from the flour and some honey I found. Takes longer, but it works. She cut herself a slice, sat down across from him. My mother taught me before she died. Only thing she did teach me, actually. She'd be proud. Mara's throat tightened. Maybe. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that happens when 2 people stop performing for each other and just exist in the same space. You're different, Gideon said eventually, than you were 3 weeks ago. How so? Stronger. Not just your body, though that too. You move different. Hold yourself different. Mara flexed her hands. The blisters had turned to calluses, hard and useful. I feel different, like I'm waking up from a long sleep. That what it was like? With Rourke? She considered lying, deflecting. But Gideon had been honest with her. She owed him the same. It was like being erased. Every day he'd take a little more until there was almost nothing left. Just this small, scared thing in a dark room waiting to be hurt. But you got out. I got lucky. He got drunk, forgot to lock the cellar. I ran. She stared at the bread on her plate. Took me 40 miles before someone found me. Farmer's wife. She fed me, gave me a place to sleep. Then her husband came home and decided I was worth more sold than kept. Bastard. Can't really blame him. I had nothing to offer. No skills, no money, no family.
She met Gideon's eyes. Until you. I'm not your family. No, but you're the first person in 6 years who's treated me like I might be worth something more than what they could get for me. Gideon looked uncomfortable. He stood, cleared his plate. I'm going to check the barn. It's dark. I know. He left. Mara sat alone with the bread and the fire, and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being seen as a person instead of an object. The next morning, she woke to shouting. Mara tumbled down the ladder, still half asleep, to find Gideon at the window with his rifle. What is it? Tracks. His voice was tight. Fresh. Someone's been watching the cabin. Mara's heart stopped. How many? One set. Big man. Heavy. He circled the clearing twice, got close to the barn. When? Last night, while we were asleep. Gideon grabbed his coat. I'm going to follow the trail, see where it leads. You stay here. Bar the door. If anyone comes except me, shoot them. Gideon. Bar the door, Mara. He left. Mara dropped the heavy beam into place and stood in the center of the cabin, rifle clutched in shaking hands. It was Silas. Had to be. He'd found her. An hour passed, then 2. Mara paced like a caged animal, jumping at every sound. The wind in the trees, a branch breaking under snow, her own heartbeat hammering in her ears. When the knock came, she almost screamed, Mara, it's me. Open up. She lifted the beam, yanked the door open. Gideon stood on the threshold, face grim. Well? She demanded. Tracks lead down the mountain toward Ridge Valley. Whoever it was, they're gone now. But they'll be back. Probably. He stepped inside, set his rifle down. We need to prepare. If this is your man Rourke, he won't come alone. He'll bring help. How much help? Hard to say. 3 men minimum, maybe 5. Gideon crossed to the shelves, started pulling down ammunition. We need to fortify, shore up the windows, establish firing positions. And we need to teach you to shoot under pressure, not just at targets. When do you think he'll come? Soon. Storm season's almost over. Once the pass is clear, he'll make his move. Gideon loaded his rifle with practiced efficiency. We've got maybe 2 weeks, maybe less. Those 2 weeks were the hardest of Mara's life. Gideon drove her relentlessly, shooting drills at dawn, hand-to-hand combat practice in the afternoon, tactical planning at night. He showed her how to reinforce the cabin's weak points, how to create kill zones, how to think like someone planning an assault. Rourke knows you're here, Gideon said one evening as they nailed shutters over the windows, which means he knows you're not alone. He'll expect resistance, so we give him more than he bargains for. What if he doesn't come? Mara hammered in another nail. What if it was just some trapper passing through? You believe that? No. Then we prepare for the worst. 3 days before Gideon expected an attack, Mara woke to fresh snow. Not a storm, just a light dusting that covered the clearing in white. And in that white, new tracks. Multiple sets this time. 4, maybe 5 men. They'd come within 30 yards of the cabin and stopped. Scouting, planning. Tonight, Gideon said, studying the tracks. They'll come tonight. They wanted to see our defenses in daylight. Now they'll hit us after dark when they think we're vulnerable. So what do? We don't wait for them. Gideon's smile was cold and sharp. We go hunting. As dusk fell, they moved into position. Gideon took the high ground north of the cabin, where he had clear sight lines to the approach trails. Mara stayed inside with her rifle and strict instructions. Wait for his signal, then light them up. Full dark came. The temperature dropped. Mara crouched by the window, rifle barrel resting on the sill, and tried to control her breathing. This was it. 6 years of running, and it ended here. She wasn't ready. Would never be ready. The first shot split the night like thunder. Mara's head snapped up. That was Gideon's rifle, unmistakable. It was followed by shouting, more gunfire. She couldn't see anything from her position, just darkness and muzzle flashes in the trees. Then a voice cut through the chaos, loud and familiar, and so full of rage it made her bones vibrate. Mara, I know you're in there. Silas, her hand started shaking so hard she nearly dropped the rifle. You think you can run from me?
You think some mountain trash can protect you? More gunfire. Someone screamed. Not Gideon, someone else. I'm going to burn this place to the ground. And when I pull you out of the ashes, I'm going to make you wish you died in that cellar. Mara forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. She wasn't that person anymore. Wasn't the scared thing in the dark waiting to be hurt. She was someone who'd hauled water until her shoulders stopped shaking. Who'd killed her first animal with her bare hands. Who'd learned to shoot, to fight, to survive. She was someone who'd survived 6 years in hell and come out the other side. Movement at the tree line. A figure running toward the cabin, low and fast. Mara raised her rifle, found the sight picture like Gideon had taught her. Breathed, aimed, squeezed. The rifle kicked. The figure stumbled, went down. She'd hit him. She'd actually hit him. No time to think about it. Another shape at the edge of the clearing. She swung the rifle, fired again. Missed. The shape dove behind the woodpile. Good shot, Gideon's voice somewhere in the darkness. Keep them pinned! Mara reloaded, hands moving on autopilot. Another figure broke cover running for the barn. She led him by 3 feet and fired. He dropped. This time she didn't hesitate, didn't question, just reloaded and scanned for the next target. The battle lasted maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Time went strange, stretched, and compressed. When it finally stopped, 4 bodies lay in the snow, and the 5th, Silas, she was sure it was Silas, had retreated into the trees. Gideon appeared from the darkness, rifle smoking. Blood ran down his left arm. You hit? Mara called. Grazed. I'm fine. He moved to the nearest body, checked for weapons. You did good. Real good. He got away. Yeah, but he won't come back tonight, not after losing 4 men. Gideon straightened, grimaced. We bought ourselves time. Now we need to use it. They dragged the bodies into the barn, couldn't leave them in the clearing to freeze, and tended Gideon's wound. The bullet had carved a shallow furrow across his bicep, painful but not dangerous. Mara cleaned and bandaged it while Gideon sat stone still and silent. You were right, she said quietly. I needed to be ready. You were ready. You just didn't know it yet. I killed 2 people tonight. You defended your home. There's a difference. Mara tied off the bandage. Does it get easier? No, it gets familiar. That's not the same thing. They sat in silence, listening to the wind. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the blood in the clearing, erasing the evidence of violence. He'll be back, Mara said. Stronger next time. I know. So what do? Wait for him to bring an army? No. Gideon stood, tested his arm. We don't wait. We take the fight to him. What? He's wounded now, lost men, lost face. He'll be holed up at his ranch, licking his wounds, gathering reinforcements. That's when he's most vulnerable. Gideon met her eyes. We hit him first. Hard. Make sure he can't come back. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way this ends. He crossed to the window, looked out at the falling snow. Your choice, Mara. We can stay here and wait for him to come back with 20 men. Or we can end this now. Mara thought about the cellar, the darkness, the brand on her arm. 6 years of being too afraid to fight back. She stood up. Tell me your plan. Gideon spread a hand-drawn map across the table, the paper wrinkled and stained from years of use. His finger traced a path down the mountain, through the valley, to a cluster of crude squares representing buildings. Rourke's ranch sits here, about 15 miles southeast. Main house, bunkhouse, barn, storage shed. He runs maybe 30 head of cattle, keeps 4 or 5 hands year-round. Gideon tapped the barn. This is what we hit. His winter feed stores. Without hay, his cattle starve. Without cattle, he's got no income. No income, no men. No men, no threat. Mara studied the map, her pulse hammering. When? Tomorrow night. Storm's moving in again. Should give us cover. He glanced at his bandaged arm. We go in quiet, set the fire, get out before anyone knows we're there. And if they catch us? They won't. But if they do? Gideon's eyes met hers, cold and certain. Then we make sure they regret it. They spent the next day preparing. Gideon checked and rechecked their weapons, packed supplies, mapped escape routes.
Mara tried to eat, but her stomach was a knot of acid and fear. She kept seeing Silas's face in the darkness, hearing his voice promising to burn the cabin down. Now they were going to burn his world instead. Evening came too fast. The sky darkened to bruised purple, clouds rolling and heavy with snow. Gideon saddled both horses while Mara changed into the darkest clothes she could find: black wool pants, a dark gray shirt, Gideon's spare coat that hung loose on her frame. "Remember," Gideon said as they mounted up, "we're not there to fight. We're there to destroy and disappear. You see trouble, you run. Don't try to be a hero." "What about you?" "I'm already dead, have been for years." He urged his horse forward. "Let's go." They rode down the mountain in silence, the temperature dropping with every mile. Snow began to fall around midnight, thick flakes that muffled sound and reduced visibility to maybe 20 feet. Perfect conditions for what they planned. 3 hours later, they stopped on a ridge overlooking Rourke's ranch. Even through the snow, Mara could make out the buildings, dark shapes against darker ground. A single lamp burned in the main house window. "He's awake," Gideon murmured, "probably nursing his wounds, planning his next move." "How many men?" "Hard to say. Lost 4 last night. Might have 2 or 3 left. Might have sent for reinforcements." He dismounted, tied his horse to a tree. "Doesn't matter. We're not going near the bunkhouse." They moved on foot, leading the horses until they were within a quarter mile. Then they hobbled the animals and continued alone, rifles slung across their backs, carrying bundles of oil-soaked rags and lucifer matches. The barn loomed ahead, larger than Mara expected. Through gaps in the planking, she could see hay stacked floor to ceiling, thousands of pounds of feed that represented Silas's entire operation. Gideon held up a hand, signaling her to stop. He crept forward, checked the barn door. Unlocked. Of course it was unlocked. Who would steal hay in the middle of winter? They slipped inside. The smell hit Mara immediately. Dried grass and horse and old leather. In the darkness, she could barely make out the massive stacks, the ladder leading to the loft. Gideon pointed up. She nodded, understanding. Fire rises. Start at the top. They climbed the ladder, moving slowly to avoid making noise. The loft was packed wall to wall with hay bales, a tinderbox waiting for a spark. Gideon pulled out the oil-soaked rags and began placing them strategically between bales. Mara did the same, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped the bundle. This was it. The point of no return. Once they lit this fire, there was no taking it back. When the rags were positioned, Gideon pulled out the matches. He looked at Mara, a question in his eyes. She nodded. He struck the first match. The flame flared bright in the darkness, impossibly loud. He touched it to a rag and the oil caught with a soft whoosh. Then the second match, third, fourth. Within 30 seconds, 5 separate fires were burning in the loft. The hay began to smolder, smoke rising in lazy spirals. "Move," Gideon hissed. They scrambled down the ladder. The smoke was already thickening, the temperature rising. By the time they hit the ground floor, the first flames were visible above, orange tongues licking at the rafters. They ran for the door. "Who's there?" The shout came from the direction of the bunkhouse. A figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by lamplight. Gideon shoved Mara toward the trees. "Go!" "But go!" She ran. Behind her she heard shouting, the crack of a rifle, Gideon returning fire. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. Just crashed through the snow toward where they'd left the horses, her lungs burning, her legs pumping. More shots. Someone screaming. The barn was fully ablaze now, flames shooting through the roof, lighting up the night like a second sun. Mara reached the horses, her hands fumbling with the hobbles. "Come on, come on!" Footsteps behind her. She spun, reaching for her rifle. Gideon emerged from the snow, limping badly. Blood darkened his left leg. "You're hit." "I'm fine." "Mount up." "You're not fine, you're—" "Mount up!" He practically threw her onto the mare, then hauled himself onto the bay with a grunt of pain. They kicked the horses into a gallop, crashing through the forest with all the subtlety of a rock slide. Behind them, the barn roared like a living thing, the fire so hot it turned the falling snow to steam. They rode hard for an hour before Gideon finally slowed. His face was gray, his jaw clenched against pain. "Let me see," Mara said. "We need to keep moving."
Let me see or I'll shoot you myself. Gideon pulled up, swaying in the saddle. Mara dismounted and helped him down. His left pant leg was soaked with blood, the fabric torn where a bullet had punched through the meat of his thigh. It went clean through, he said through gritted teeth. That's good, right? I don't know. Mara's hand shook as she examined the wound. The entrance hole was small, the exit larger and uglier. Blood pulsed with each heartbeat. You need a doctor. Closest doctor is in Ash Creek. That's 2 days' ride in good conditions. He looked up at the sky, at the snow falling heavier now. We'll never make it. Then we go back to the cabin. That's the first place they'll look. I don't care. Mara tore strips from her shirt, wadded them against the wound. Gideon hissed in pain. We're going back. You're going to tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it. Mara, shh. We're going back. Her voice was steel. Now get on the damn horse. The ride back was a nightmare. Gideon kept drifting, his weight shifting dangerously in the saddle. Twice Mara had to stop and physically hold him upright. The snow fell harder, the wind picked up, and the cold was so intense it felt like knives in her lungs. Dawn was breaking when they finally reached the cabin. Mara half-carried Gideon inside, got him onto his bedroll, and went to work. She'd watched him dress wounds before, had learned the basics. Clean the injury, pack it to stop bleeding, watch for infection. Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. She boiled water, found clean cloth, pulled out the bottle of whiskey Gideon kept for emergencies. When she poured it over the wound, Gideon's back arched and he made a sound like a wounded animal. I'm sorry. Do it, he gasped. Don't stop. She cleaned both holes as best she could, packed them with cloth, and wrapped the whole mess tight enough to slow the bleeding. By the time she finished, Gideon had passed out, and she was covered in his blood. Mara sat back on her heels and tried not to panic. He could die. The wound could get infected. He could bleed out in his sleep. 100 things could go wrong. And if he died, she was alone on this mountain with winter closing in and Silas Rourke hunting her. She fed the stove, checked Gideon's bandages, and tried to think. They'd destroyed Silas's winter stores. That would hurt him, maybe buy them time. But it wouldn't stop him. If anything, it would make him angrier, more desperate. He'd come for her. Soon, and when he did, she'd be defending the cabin alone. Gideon slept through the day and into the next night. His breathing was ragged, his skin hot with fever. Mara changed his bandages, forced water between his lips, and waited. On the second day, he woke. How long? His voice was a rasp. 2 days. You were shot. Mara helped him drink. The fever broke this morning. The barn? Burned. We made it back. Gideon closed his eyes. They'll be coming. I know. You need to run. Take supplies, one of the horses. Head for... I'm not running. Mara's voice was flat. I'm done running. You can't fight them alone. Watch me. Gideon tried to sit up, fell back with a groan. Mara, listen to me. I can't help you. I can barely stand. If they come while I'm like this, then I'll handle it. She stood, crossed to the weapons rack. You taught me to shoot. You taught me to fight. You taught me to survive. Now I'm going to put it to use. This isn't survival. This is suicide. Maybe. She loaded her rifle with steady hands, but it's my choice to make. The attack came on the third night. Mara was dozing by the fire when the horses in the barn started screaming. She jerked awake, grabbed her rifle, and moved to the window. Torches. At least 6 of them, moving up the trail toward the cabin. Gideon. She shook him awake. They're here. He struggled to sit up, his face twisted with pain. How many? 6 that I can see, maybe more. Get me my rifle. You can barely move. Get me my rifle, or so help me I'll crawl to it myself. Mara handed him the weapon, then took her position at the window. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 6 men, maybe more. And Silas would be with them. She was certain of it. The torches stopped just outside rifle range. A voice carried across the clearing, familiar and hateful. Mara, I know you're listening. Silas. Even after 6 years, the sound of his voice made her stomach turn. Your friend burned my barn, killed my men. You think that's going to end well for you? Mara said nothing, just kept her rifle trained on the torches. I'm going to give you one chance. Come out now and I'll make it quick. Stay in there and I'll burn you out like rats. Behind her, Gideon muttered, Don't answer him. Don't give him anything. You hear me, Mara? I'm going to torch this place. And when you come running out with your hair on fire, I'm going to... Mara pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. One of the torches fell and someone screamed. That's my answer, she shouted. Come and get me, you son of a bitch. The response was immediate. Gunfire erupted from the tree line, bullets slamming into the cabin walls. Mara ducked, glass shattering above her head. Gideon fired from his position on the floor, his aim shaky but determined. The barn! He yelled. They're going for the barn! Mara swung her rifle toward the barn and saw two figures running low and fast. She fired, missed, chambered another round. The second shot hit one of the runners in the leg, and he went down hard. The other made it to the barn door and disappeared inside. He's going to set it, Gideon said. Same thing we did to them. The horses. Forget the horses. We need to... The barn exploded into flames so fast it took Mara's breath away. The man must have doused the whole interior with oil before lighting it. Within seconds, the entire structure was an inferno, and inside the horses were screaming. No! Mara started for the door. Gideon grabbed her arm with his good hand. You can't help them. I have to. You'll die. His grip was iron. They're already gone. Don't make it meaningless. The screaming stopped. The barn collapsed inward with a roar like thunder, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Mara stood frozen, her whole body shaking. Those horses had carried her up the mountain, had survived the winter, had trusted her, and she'd failed them. Focus, Gideon said, his voice cutting through her grief. They're going to rush us now. Get ready. He was right. The moment the barn collapsed, Silas's men broke cover. They came from 3 directions at once, firing as they ran. Mara dropped the first one at 30 yards. Gideon got the second, but there were too many, moving too fast. One of them reached the cabin wall right below the window. Mara heard scraping, smelled oil. They're going to burn us out, she said. I know. Gideon reloaded with hands that shook from fever. Back door, we go out shooting. There are 5 of them left, at least. Then we take as many as we can with us. He looked at her, his eyes clear despite the fever. I'm sorry I got you into this. You didn't. I walked into it with my eyes open. Mara moved to the back door, rifle ready. And I'm walking out the same way. The smell of oil was overwhelming now. Any second they'd light it. Mara took a breath. This was it. No more running, no more hiding. She was going to face Silas Rourke, and one of them wasn't walking away. The door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. Mara fired without thinking, saw a man go down. Then she was through the opening, rolling to the side as bullets tore up the ground where she'd been standing. Gideon came after her, slower, limping. He fired twice, both shots finding targets. Mara ran for the tree line, using the burning barn for cover. Behind her, she heard Gideon yelling her name, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. She'd seen Silas. Standing at the edge of the clearing, directing his men, watching the cabin burn with satisfaction on his scarred face. Mara circled wide, using the terrain Gideon had taught her to read. The wind was coming from the north, which meant anyone downwind wouldn't hear her approach. The snow muffled her footsteps. She came up on Silas from behind, rifle raised. He must have sensed her. He spun, his own weapon coming up. They faced each other across 10 feet of blood-stained snow, the man who'd owned her for 6 years, the woman who'd escaped. There you are, Silas said, almost pleasantly. I was starting to think you'd gotten shy. I'm done being scared of you. That's so? He smiled, revealing teeth gone black at the edges. You sure about that? Because I can still see it in your eyes. That fear. That knowledge that you belong to me. I never belonged to you. Your father thought different. Sold you to me for $50 and a horse. Best purchase I ever made. He took a step closer. You were so pretty when you were young, before you got fat and useless. Mara's hands tightened on her rifle. Don't let him bait you. Don't let him in your head. I'm going to take you back, Silas continued, his voice almost gentle. And this time, I'm going to make sure you never run again. Maybe I'll take your feet or your eyes. Haven't decided yet. You're not taking me anywhere. You think you can shoot me? You can barely hold that rifle steady." He was right. Her hands were shaking, her finger trembling on the trigger. 6 years of fear. 6 years of abuse. 6 years of being told she was worthless, useless, nothing. But 6 weeks of Mara hauling water until her back stopped hurting. 6 weeks of killing animals to survive. 6 weeks of learning she was stronger than anyone had ever told her. Mara steadied her breathing, felt the weight of the rifle, found the sight picture. "Try me," she said. Silas laughed. "You won't do it. You're too weak. Always were." Behind them, the cabin caught fire. Flames roared into the sky. Mara pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked. Silas stumbled backward, his weapon falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. He looked down at the hole in his chest, then back at Mara with something like surprise. "You shot me," he said, almost wonderingly. "Yeah." Mara chambered another round. "I did. You actually shot me. Did you think I wouldn't?" Silas's legs gave out. He sat down hard in the snow, blood spreading across his shirt like a dark flower. "I made you," he whispered. "I owned you." "You owned a scared girl." Mara lowered the rifle. "I'm not her anymore." She turned and walked away, leaving Silas Rourke bleeding in the snow. Gunfire still crackled near the cabin. Mara ran toward it, saw Gideon pinned down behind a woodpile, 2 of Silas's men closing in. She shot the first one before he knew she was there. The second spun toward her and Gideon got him from behind. Then silence. Just the roar of the flames and the wind in the trees. "Silas?" Gideon asked, breathing hard. "Dead. Or dying." Mara helped him to his feet. "We need to move. The whole cabin's going up." They stumbled away from the burning structure, watching as everything they'd built together turned to ash and ember. The walls collapsed inward. The roof caved with a shower of sparks. Within an hour, there was nothing left but charred logs and smoke. Mara and Gideon sat in the snow at the edge of the clearing and watched it burn. "I'm sorry," Gideon said finally. "For what?" "Your home." "It was your home. I was just staying there." "It was our home." He winced, adjusted his bandaged leg. "And now it's gone." Mara looked at the ruins, at the smoking remains of the life she'd started to build. Then she looked at Gideon, wounded and exhausted and still alive. "We can rebuild," she said. "With what? We've got no supplies, no shelter, and winter's not done yet." "We've got each other." She stood, offered him her hand. "That's more than either of us had when we started." Gideon took her hand and pulled himself upright. Together they walked into the forest, leaving the burning cabin behind. Dawn found them in a cave 2 miles north, a space Gideon had used before for emergency shelter. It was small and cold, but it was dry, and right now that was enough. Gideon's fever had returned. Mara built a fire, changed his bandages, and watched him drift in and out of consciousness. "We should have run," he mumbled. "Should have left when we had the chance." "We did run. We ran at them instead of away." Mara fed more wood to the fire. "And we won." "Did we?" "Look at us." Mara looked. A wounded man and a woman with nothing but the clothes on their backs, hiding in a cave while their enemies burned. "Yeah," she said. "We won. Because Silas is dead and we're not. That's winning." Gideon's eyes focused on her face. "You really shot him." "I really did." "How do you feel?" Mara considered the question. How did she feel? Not triumphant, not relieved, just tired. Bone deep, soul deep, tired. "I feel free," she said finally. "For the first time in 6 years, I feel free." Gideon nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." He slept. Mara kept watch, feeding the fire, listening to the wind. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the blood in the bodies and the ruins of everything they'd built. But come spring, the snow would melt, the forest would green, and they would still be here, still standing, still alive. That had to count for something. The cave kept them alive for 3 days, but just barely. Gideon's leg worsened despite Mara's best efforts, the wound hot and angry, leaking fluid that smelled wrong. He drifted through fever dreams, calling out names she didn't recognize, speaking in fragments about a war she knew nothing about. Mara hunted when she could, setting snares near the cave entrance, checking them with frozen fingers. She caught 2 rabbits and a squirrel. Not enough. Never enough. On the 4th morning, Gideon woke lucid for the first time in days. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice rough but clear. "You're in no condition to move." "I'm in no condition to live much longer if we don't." He struggled to sit up, his face going gray with the effort. "That leg's infected. I need real medicine, a real doctor, and you need shelter that's not a hole in the ground." "Where do we go? The cabin's gone. Silas's ranch is probably crawling with whoever's left of his men." "Ash Creek." Gideon coughed, winced. "There's a doctor there, woman named Harlow. She patched me up once before, didn't ask questions." "Ash Creek is where they sold me." "I know, but it's also the only settlement within 100 miles. He met her eyes. "You want me to live? That's where we go." Mara wanted to argue, wanted to find another option, but she knew he was right. The cave was killing them slowly. At least in town they had a chance. "Can you ride?" "No, but I can hold on while you lead the horse." "We don't have a horse. They burned in the barn." Gideon's jaw tightened. "Then we walk." They left the cave at midday, Gideon leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch, Mara carrying their few remaining supplies. The journey down the mountain was brutal. What had taken 2 days on horseback stretched into 5 days of stumbling, falling, and forcing themselves back up. Gideon's fever came and went in waves. Sometimes he was present, aware, making dark jokes about dying in the snow. Other times he was somewhere else entirely, fighting battles that had ended years ago. On the 3rd day, he collapsed completely. Mara tried to wake him, shook him, shouted his name. Nothing worked. She stood alone on the mountainside with an unconscious man and no help coming. For a long moment, she considered leaving him. It would be easier, faster. She could make Ash Creek in 2 days on her own, maybe find help, come back. Except she knew she wouldn't come back. Once she left him here, he was dead. Mara grabbed him under the arms and dragged him to a fallen tree, propped him against it. Then she went looking for help. An hour later, she found it in the form of a trapper heading up the mountain, leading a mule loaded with supplies. He was old, weathered like dried leather, with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "You lost?" he asked. "My partner's hurt. Back that way, maybe a mile. I need help getting him to Ash Creek." The trapper studied her, taking in her worn clothes, her desperate eyes. "What happened to him?" "Gunshot. It's infected." "And who shot him?" "Men who won't be shooting anyone else." The old man considered this. Then he spat into the snow. "Show me." They found Gideon where Mara had left him, barely breathing. The trapper examined the wound with practiced efficiency, his expression darkening. "This is bad, real bad. He should be dead already. Can you help us get him to town?" "I can get him to town. Can't promise he'll survive the trip." He gestured to the mule. "Help me get him loaded." It took both of them to lift Gideon onto the mule, tying him in place so he wouldn't fall. He didn't wake during the process, which scared Mara more than anything. They made camp that night in a cluster of pines. The trapper, he said his name was Dutch, didn't offer more, built a fire and produced a flask of something that smelled like it could strip paint. "For the wound," he said, handing it to Mara. "Might help. Might not. Worth trying." Mara cleaned Gideon's leg again, poured the alcohol over the infected tissue. He jerked awake with a scream, his hands grabbing at her wrists. "It's me," she said quickly. "Mara, you're okay. We're getting you help." His eyes focused on her face. "Mara." "Yeah." "Did I die?" "Not yet." "Shame. Dying would hurt less. He looked past her to Dutch. "Who's that?" "Friend. He's helping us get to Ash Creek." "No friends on this mountain, just people who want something." Dutch laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Smart man. What I want is to not have a corpse on my trail. Bad for business. So I'm helping you to town, then you're someone else's problem." "Fair enough." Gideon's eyes closed again. "Wake me when we get there." They reached Ash Creek 2 days later, riding in just after dawn. The town looked exactly as Mara remembered. Ugly, sprawling, desperate. The street where they'd auctioned her was empty now, just frozen mud and scattered trash. Dutch led them to a small house on the edge of town, smoke rising from its chimney. He pounded on the door with a fist like a hammer. "Harlow, got a customer for you." The door opened to reveal a woman in her 40s, thin and sharp-eyed, with gray streaking through her dark hair. She took one look at Gideon and swore, "Get him inside. Now." They carried him to a table that had seen more blood than food. Harlow cut away his pants leg, examined the wound, and swore again. "This has been infected for what? A week?" "Give or take," Mara said. "He should be dead." "Everyone keeps saying that." "Because it's true." Harlow began pulling supplies from shelves, bottles, bandages, instruments that looked medieval. "I'm going to have to debride the wound, cut away the dead tissue. It's going to hurt like hell, and he might not survive it." "Do it anyway." "You're paying for this, I assume." Mara's stomach dropped. She had nothing. No money, no goods to trade, nothing. Dutch spoke up from the doorway. "I'll cover it. Call it an investment in my conscience." Harlow snorted. "Didn't know you had one." "Neither did I. Guess I'm full of surprises." He tipped his hat to Mara. "Good luck, girl. You're going to need it." He left. Mara stood by the table as Harlow worked, holding Gideon's hand while the doctor cut into his leg with a scalpel. He didn't scream, he was too far gone for that, but his body went rigid, every muscle locked tight. The procedure took over an hour. When Harlow finally stepped back, her hands were covered in blood and pus. "Best I can do. If the infection doesn't kill him in the next 3 days, he might live." She washed her hands in a basin. "You'll need to change the dressing twice a day. Watch for fever. I'll give you supplies." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Like I said, he might still die." Harlow dried her hands, turned to face Mara properly. "You're the girl from the auction, few months back." Mara's throat tightened. "Yes." "Thought you looked familiar. You've changed. Harder now. Leaner. Mountain does that. Mountain does that to people who survive it. Most don't." Harlow gestured to Gideon. "He the one who bought you?" "Yes." "Decent man, from what I've heard. Keeps to himself. Doesn't cause trouble." She paused. "The men who shot him, they the ones causing all that commotion out at Rourke's ranch?" Mara's blood went cold. "What commotion?" "You haven't heard? Barn burned to the ground about a week ago. Then Silas Rourke turned up dead in the snow with a bullet in his chest. Half his men dead or missing. Whole ranch is a ghost town now." "I wouldn't know anything about that?" "Course not." Harlow's expression was unreadable. "Just making conversation. Anyway, Rourke's brother showed up 3 days ago. He's been asking questions. Looking for a woman matching your description." The floor seemed to tilt under Mara's feet. "Brother?" "Twin brother, actually. Marcus Rourke. Runs a trading outfit out of Summit Ridge. Word is he's not happy about what happened to Silas. Been buying information, hiring men." "How many men?" "Don't know, but I'd guess more than you can handle." Harlow pulled a blanket over Gideon. "You should leave. Soon as he's stable enough to move, get out of this territory. Go east, go west, doesn't matter. Just go." "I'm done running." "Then you're done living. Marcus Rourke makes his brother look like a choir boy. He won't just kill you. He'll make an example of you." Mara looked down at Gideon, unconscious on the table, his skin the color of old parchment. "When can he travel?" "A week, maybe 2 if the infection clears." "We don't have 2 weeks." "Then you've got a problem." Harlow began cleaning her instruments. "There's a room out back you can use. It's not much, but it's got a stove and a bed. I'll check on him twice a day. Beyond that, you're on your own." The room was exactly what Harlow had described. Small, cold, furnished with a narrow bed and a potbelly stove that needed constant feeding. Mara made a pallet on the floor for herself and kept watch over Gideon, changing his bandages, forcing water between his lips when he was conscious enough to swallow. 3 days passed. The infection began to recede. Gideon's fever broke on the 4th day, and he woke to find Mara asleep in a chair beside the bed, her rifle across her lap. "You look terrible," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Mara's eyes snapped open. "You're awake." "Unfortunately." He tried to sit up, failed. "Where are we?" "Ash Creek, Harlow's place." "How long?" 4 days since we got here. Almost 2 weeks since you were shot. Gideon absorbed this. And Silas? Dead, but his brother's here, Marcus. He's looking for us. Of course he is. Gideon closed his eyes. We should run. That's what everyone keeps saying, because it's the smart play. Since when do we make smart plays? Mara leaned forward. We burned his brother's barn, killed his men, shot Silas in the chest. Running now doesn't change any of that. Marcus will hunt us wherever we go. So what's your plan? Walk out into the street and challenge him to a duel? No. My plan is to finish what we started. She stood, moved to the window. Outside, Ash Creek was waking up, people moving through the frozen streets. We destroyed Silas's operation. Now we destroy Marcus's. With what army? I can barely stand and you're one woman with a rifle. I'm one woman who survived 6 years of hell, 2 weeks on a mountain, and killing the man who owned me. I think I can handle Marcus Rourke. Gideon stared at her. You've lost your mind. Probably, but I'm done being afraid, done waiting for someone to save me or kill me or decide what happens next. She turned to face him. I'm going after Marcus. You can come with me when you're able, or you can stay here and heal. Your choice. Mara, it's my choice, Gideon. For the first time in my life, it's my choice, and I choose to fight. She left before he could argue further, stepping out into the cold morning air. She had no plan, no allies, no resources, just a rifle, and the knowledge that if she didn't act first, Marcus would hunt her down and end her. The saloon was the obvious place to start. Men with information always ended up in saloons. Mara pushed through the door into a wall of smoke and whiskey smell, every eye in the room turning to look at her. The bartender, a thick-necked man with prison tattoos on his knuckles, jerked his chin at her. We don't serve women. I'm not here for a drink. I'm here for information. Then you're in the wrong place. I'm looking for Marcus Rourke. The room went quiet. Someone coughed. A chair scraped. The bartender's expression didn't change. Don't know anyone by that name. Liar. Mara stepped further into the room. His brother died 2 weeks ago. Marcus has been in town asking questions, hiring men. I know he was here. Tell me where he is. Or what? You going to shoot up my bar? If I have to. The bartender laughed. So did several of the men. But a few didn't laugh. A few looked nervous. Marcus Rourke isn't someone you want to find, the bartender said. Take my advice and get out of town while you still can. I didn't ask for advice. I asked for information. And I'm telling you, I don't have any. Mara turned to address the room. Anyone here know where Marcus Rourke is staying? I'll pay for the information. With what? Someone called. You look like you don't have 2 coins to rub together. I'll trade work, cooking, cleaning, whatever you need. More laughter. Then a voice from the back, quiet and rough. Why are you looking for Marcus? Mara turned. An old man sat in the corner, half hidden in shadow. He was ancient, his face a map of wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp. He's looking for me, Mara said. I want to find him first. You're the one who killed Silas. It wasn't a question. Mara nodded anyway. Bold move, killing O'Rourke. Stupid, but bold. The old man stood, shuffled toward her. Marcus is staying at the old garrison place, north edge of town, big house with green shutters. Can't miss it. Why are you telling me this? Because the Rourkes have been a plague on this valley for 30 years. Someone finally standing up to them? He smiled, revealing gaps where teeth used to be. I want to see how it ends. Mara left the saloon with the information she needed and a sick feeling in her gut. She'd found Marcus. Now she had to figure out what to do with that knowledge. The garrison house was exactly where the old man said it would be. A 2-story structure that had seen better days, paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked. Smoke rose from 2 chimneys. Armed men stood outside, 3 of them, watching the street with the cold eyes of professionals. Mara studied the house from a distance, counting windows, noting exits. 5 men outside. How many inside? 10? 20? She had no way of knowing. This was insane. She knew it was insane. Walking into Marcus Rourke's base of operations with nothing but a rifle and audacity was suicide, but the alternative was waiting for him to come for her, and she was done waiting. She was halfway to the house when someone grabbed her arm and yanked her into an alley. Mara spun, bringing her rifle up. Gideon held up his hands. Easy. What are you doing out of bed? Stopping you from getting killed. He looked terrible, his face drawn and pale, leaning heavily on a crutch. You really were going to just walk up and knock on the door. I don't have a better plan. Then we make one. He gestured to the house. How many guards did you count? 3 outside. Unknown inside. Safe to assume at least 6 more, probably 10. Call it 13 total. Gideon grimaced. We can't fight those odds straight up. So what do we do? We think like you did at Silas's ranch. Hit them where they're weak. Make them come to us on our terms. And where are they weak? Gideon smiled, though it looked more like a grimace. Their boss is arrogant, probably thinks a woman poses no real threat. We use that. Use it how? You walk up to that door, tell the guards you want to talk to Marcus. Offer him a trade. What trade? Information about how Silas died. Names of who helped you. Make it sound valuable. Gideon shifted his weight, wincing. While you're keeping him busy, I circle around back, set the place on fire. That's your plan? The same plan we used before? It worked before. Barely, and you nearly died. I'm nearly dead anyway. Might as well make it count. He met her eyes. You got a better idea? Mara didn't, and time was running out. Every hour they waited was another hour for Marcus to find them first. Okay, she said. We do it tonight. They spent the afternoon preparing. Gideon rested while Mara gathered supplies, oil from a general store, rags from a burned-out building, matches from a dead man's pocket. By sunset, they were as ready as they'd ever be. Gideon could barely walk, but he refused to stay behind. They moved through the darkening streets toward the garrison house, 2 ghosts with nothing left to lose. At the edge of the property, Gideon stopped. Give me 20 minutes to get in position, then make your approach. Be careful. You too. He hesitated, then said, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I want you to know you're the bravest person I've ever met, and I'm proud I got to know you. Mara's throat tightened. Don't get sentimental on me now. Not sentimental, just honest. He touched her shoulder briefly, then disappeared into the darkness. Mara counted to 1,200, each second stretching like taffy. Then she stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the front door. The guards saw her immediately. Rifles came up, safeties clicking off. That's far enough, one of them said. Mara stopped 10 feet away, keeping her hands visible. I need to speak with Marcus Rourke. He's not taking visitors. Tell him it's about his brother. Tell him I know who killed Silas. The guards exchanged glances. One of them disappeared inside. 5 minutes later, he returned. He'll see you, but the rifle stays here. Mara handed over her weapon, feeling naked without it. The guards patted her down roughly, found the knife in her boot, took that too. Then they led her inside. The interior of the house was surprisingly well appointed. Carpet on the floors, paintings on the walls, furniture that looked like it came from back east. Marcus Rourke sat in a leather chair by the fire, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked exactly like Silas. Same scarred face, same cold eyes, same cruel mouth. But where Silas had been wild and unpredictable, Marcus radiated calculation. So, he said, his voice smooth and cultured, you're the woman who killed my brother. I am. Bold of you to come here. Stupid, but bold. He sipped his whiskey. My men wanted to shoot you on sight. I told them to bring you in. I wanted to look at you myself. Look all you want. Oh, I am. His eyes traveled over her, assessing. Silas said you were fat and useless, but I see a survivor, someone who's learned to fight. Your brother underestimated me. Looks like you're about to make the same mistake. Marcus smiled. Am I? You walked into my house, surrendered your weapons, and now you're surrounded by armed men. Tell me how I'm the one making a mistake. Mara said nothing. Outside, she could smell smoke, faint, but there. Gideon had started the fire. Marcus's smile faded. He stood, moved to the window. What did you... The back of the house exploded into flame. The explosion wasn't massive, but it was enough. The back wall of the garrison house blew outward in a shower of burning timber and glass. Men started shouting, running toward the flames. Marcus spun toward Mara, his face twisting with rage. "You!" She didn't let him finish. She grabbed the whiskey glass from the table and smashed it across his face. He staggered back, blood streaming from his cheek. Mara ran. The guards in the hallway were already moving toward the fire, creating just enough chaos for her to slip past. She hit the front door at a dead sprint, crashed through it into the night. Gunfire erupted behind her. Bullets tore chunks out of the door frame, splintered the porch railing. Mara dove off the steps and rolled, came up running. She had no weapon, no plan beyond get away and don't die. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Behind her, more gunfire, more shouting. A figure stumbled out of the smoke at the side of the house. Gideon, moving like a man 3 steps from death, his makeshift crutch abandoned somewhere in the chaos. "Move!" he shouted. They ran together through the streets of Ash Creek, the fire lighting up the sky behind them. People were coming out of houses now, pointing, yelling. Someone rang a bell. The whole town was waking up. Gideon grabbed Mara's arm, pulled her into an alley between 2 buildings. They pressed against the wall, gasping for air. "Did it work?" he managed. "Half the house is on fire and Marcus is pissed. I'd call that a success. He'll send men after us. I know. We can't outrun them, not like this." Gideon slid down the wall to sit in the snow, his face gray. "I'm done. Can't go any further." "Yes, you can." "Mara, I can barely stand. My leg's bleeding again. I'm just slowing you down." "Then I'll slow down too." She crouched beside him. "We're in this together. That was the deal. The deal was I'd help you survive. Well, you survived. Silas is dead. You don't need me anymore." "That's not for you to decide." Footsteps pounded past the mouth of the alley. Men with torches, searching. Mara and Gideon froze, barely breathing. The footsteps faded. For now. "We need a better hiding spot," Mara whispered. "Somewhere they won't think to look." "Where? We don't know this town. We've got no allies here." Mara thought hard. Then it hit her. "Harlow. The doctor? She helped us before. Maybe she'll help again. Or maybe she'll turn us in for the reward Marcus is probably offering." "You got a better idea?" Gideon didn't. They moved through the back alleys, avoiding the main streets where men with guns were systematically searching every building. By the time they reached Harlow's place, Gideon was leaving a blood trail in the snow. Mara pounded on the door. No answer. She pounded harder. Finally, the door cracked open. Harlow's face appeared, suspicious and annoyed. "What the hell? We need help." "I already helped you. That debt's paid." "Please," Mara's voice cracked. "Marcus Rourke is hunting us. We've got nowhere else to go." Harlow's eyes went to Gideon, to the blood staining his pants, then back to Mara. "You're the ones who set that fire." "Yes." "Half the town is burning." "Not half, just one house." "Marcus Rourke's house. You've got a death wish, girl." "Probably." "Are you going to help us or not?" Harlow stared at them for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. "Get in, quick." They stumbled inside. Harlow barred the door behind them, moved to the window, peered out through a crack in the curtains. "They're searching every building on this street," she said. "They'll be here in 10 minutes, maybe less." "We can hide," Mara said. "We just need—" "There's nowhere to hide. They'll tear this place apart." Harlow turned to face them. "You want to survive the night? You need to leave town. Now." "He can't travel. Look at him." Gideon was slumped in a chair, his head tilted back, breathing shallow. Fresh blood soaked through the bandages Harlow had put on days before. The doctor examined his leg with quick, efficient movements. The wound reopened. "He's lost a lot of blood. Moving him now could kill him." "Staying here will definitely kill him," Mara said. "Not if I give him up." Harlow's voice was flat. "I tell Marcus you forced your way in here, that I had no choice. He gets what he wants, I stay alive. Everyone wins." Mara's hand went to her belt, found nothing. Her knife was gone, taken by Marcus's guards. She had no weapons, no leverage, nothing. "You won't do that," she said, hoping it was true. "Won't I? I've survived 30 years in this territory by knowing when to fold." Harlow crossed her arms. "Give me one good reason why I should risk my life for yours." Mara had no answer. She was a woman with nothing, running from men with everything. Why would anyone help her? But then Gideon spoke, his voice weak but clear. Because you're tired. Harlow's expression flickered. What? You're tired of men like the Rourkes running this valley. Tired of looking the other way when they hurt people. Tired of being scared. Gideon coughed, wiped blood from his mouth. I saw it in your eyes the first time we met. You wanted someone to stand up to them. Well, here we are, standing. You're not standing, you're dying. Maybe, but at least I'll die fighting instead of kneeling. He met her gaze. Can you say the same? Silence stretched between them. Outside, voices were getting closer. Torches flickered past the window. Harlow closed her eyes. You're going to get me killed. Probably, Mara said. Definitely. But Harlow was already moving, pulling supplies from shelves. There's a root cellar beneath the kitchen. It's small, and it stinks, but they might not find it. Get down there now. Mara helped Gideon to his feet. Harlow lifted a rug, revealed a trap door cut into the floor. Below was darkness and the smell of earth. How long do we have to stay down there? Mara asked. Until they stop searching. Could be an hour, could be all night. Harlow handed her a candle and matches. Don't make a sound. Don't light the candle unless you absolutely have to, and pray they don't have dogs. They descended into the cellar. It was exactly as Harlow described, cramped, damp, reeking of mold and old vegetables. The trapdoor closed above them, plunging them into absolute darkness. Mara helped Gideon settle against the earthen wall. His breathing was labored, each inhale a struggle. You still with me? She whispered. For now. Stay with me. We're going to get through this. You don't know that. I know I'm not losing you, not after everything. Gideon's hand found hers in the darkness. His skin was cold, clammy. Mara, listen. If I don't make it, don't. If I don't make it, you take whatever money Harlow can spare and you go east. Find a city, somewhere big enough to disappear. Start over. I'm not leaving you. You might not have a choice. Above them, heavy footsteps shook the floorboards. Men's voices, muffled but angry. Mara held her breath. Where are they? Marcus's voice, unmistakable. I told you, I haven't seen anyone. Harlow sounded convincing, bored even. You're wasting your time here. We'll decide what's a waste of time. Search the place. Footsteps scattered in different directions. Doors slammed open. Furniture scraped across floors. Mara squeezed Gideon's hand, willing herself to stay silent. Something heavy crashed directly above them. Glass shattered. A man swore. Anything? Marcus called. Nothing, just medical supplies. Check the back room again. More footsteps, more destruction. The search went on for what felt like hours, but was probably 15 minutes. Finally, Marcus spoke again. They're not here. Move to the next house. The footsteps retreated. The door slammed. Silence. Mara didn't move. Didn't dare. They could be waiting outside, listening for any sound. 10 minutes passed. 20. Then the trapdoor lifted and Harlow's face appeared, lit by lamplight. They're gone. For now. Mara and Gideon crawled out of the cellar. The house was wrecked. Shelves overturned, supplies scattered, one window broken. Harlow surveyed the damage with a kind of resigned acceptance. Well, that's that then. Can't stay neutral anymore. She looked at Mara. You've made an enemy of Marcus Rourke, which means I have too. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just make it worth it. Harlow turned to Gideon, checked his pulse, his pupils. He needs rest, real rest. And we need a plan that's better than hiding in cellars. I'm working on it, Mara said. Work faster. Marcus won't stop until you're dead. And now that he knows you've got help in town, he'll come back with more men, more guns. We've got maybe 24 hours before this place becomes a war zone. Mara moved to the broken window, looked out at the dark street. Somewhere out there, Marcus Rourke was planning his next move, gathering reinforcements, preparing to finish what his brother started. She was one woman with a wounded partner and a doctor who'd just burned her last bridge, against a man with money, men, and nothing to lose. The smart play was to run, take Harlow's advice, find a city, disappear. But Mara was done running. We end this, she said. Tomorrow. One way or another. How? Harlow asked. The same way we've done everything else. We make him come to us. And when he does, we make sure he doesn't leave. Gideon laughed, a sound like broken glass. You want to ambush Marcus Rourke? Yes. With what? You've got no weapons, no supplies, no advantage. We've got knowledge. We know he wants me dead. We know he's angry and probably not thinking straight. And we know exactly where he'll look for us next. Where? Mara turned from the window. Here. He'll come back. He knows Harlow helped us. He'll burn this place to the ground just to make a point. So we turn Harlow's house into a killing ground, Gideon said slowly. Use his rage against him. Exactly. Harlow held up her hands. Hold on. You want to use my home as bait? You got a better option? Marcus already suspects you helped us. You think he's going to just let that slide? She's right, Gideon said. You're a target now, whether you like it or not. Might as well make it count. Harlow looked between them, then at the wreckage of her house. I've lived here 30 years, delivered half the babies in this town, patched up men who deserved to die and saved ones who didn't deserve to live. And now it comes to this. I'm sorry, Mara said again. Stop apologizing and start planning. Harlow moved to a cabinet, pulled out a shotgun that looked older than the town itself. Tell me what you need. They spent the night preparing. Harlow had more weapons than Mara expected. 2 rifles, the shotgun, 3 pistols, and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. She also had lamp oil, rope, and a working knowledge of where every structural weakness in the house was located. Gideon, despite his wounds, mapped out firing positions, escape routes, kill zones. He moved like a man possessed, his pain pushed aside by the familiar rhythms of combat planning. We'll need someone on the 2nd floor, he said, sketching on a piece of paper. High ground, clear sight lines to the street. Someone downstairs covering the front and back doors, and someone mobile, ready to respond wherever they're needed. That's 3 people, Harlow said. We've got 3 people, which means we can't afford mistakes. Gideon looked at Mara. You're the best shot. You take the 2nd floor. What about you? I'll cover the back door. Can't move fast, but I can shoot. Harlow, you're mobile. You've got the shotgun. Anyone gets through our perimeter, you stop them. And what makes you think Marcus will come at all? Harlow asked. Maybe he'll just wait us out, starve us. He won't wait. His pride won't let him. Gideon tapped the map. We humiliated him, burned his house, made him look weak in front of his men. He has to respond or he loses credibility. So we're betting our lives on his ego. We've bet on worse. Dawn came gray and cold. They took their positions, weapons loaded, and waited. The town was quiet. Too quiet. No one moved in the streets. No smoke from chimneys. It was like Ash Creek was holding its breath. Mara crouched by the 2nd floor window, rifle resting on the sill. From here she could see the entire street, the approaches from both ends. Nothing moved. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun climbed higher but brought no warmth. Maybe he's not coming, Harlow called from downstairs. He's coming, Gideon replied, just being smart about it. Another hour. Mara's legs cramped from staying still. Her eyes burned from staring at the empty street. Then she saw them. Men. Lots of men. Coming from both ends of the street, moving in a coordinated advance, at least 20, maybe more. Contact, she yelled. North and south. How many? Gideon called. Too many. The men spread out, taking cover behind buildings, water troughs, anything that would stop a bullet. Professional. Organized. Marcus Rourke stepped into the middle of the street, flanked by 2 heavily armed guards. He carried no weapon himself, just stood there in his expensive coat, looking at Harlow's house like it was already rubble. Mara Dorsey! His voice carried clear in the morning air. I'm going to give you one chance. Come out now and I'll make it quick. Stay inside and I'll burn you out and make it last for days. Mara said nothing, just sighted down her rifle, finger on the trigger. Last chance, Marcus called. I'm counting to 10. 1. Mara aimed at the man to Marcus's right, breathed, steadied. 2! She pulled the trigger. The guard went down. The street erupted in gunfire. Bullets slammed into the house from every direction. Windows shattered, wood splintered. Mara ducked below the windowsill as the wall behind her exploded into splinters. She counted to 3, popped up, fired again. Another man went down. Downstairs, Gideon's rifle cracked twice. Harlow's shotgun boomed like thunder. Mara reloaded, moved to a different window, found a target, fired. The man stumbled but didn't fall. She fired again and he dropped. This was insane. They were outnumbered 5-1, maybe worse. Every second she expected a bullet to find her, to end this. But seconds turned to minutes and she was still shooting, still breathing, still alive. One of Marcus's men tried to rush the front door. Harlow's shotgun caught him square in the chest and he flew backward like he'd been kicked by a horse. Another tried the side window. Gideon shot him through the glass. The attackers pulled back, regrouped. Mara used the lull to reload, her hand shaking so badly she dropped bullets twice. "We can't hold them," Harlow yelled. "There are too many." "We don't have to hold them forever," Mara shouted back. "Just long enough." "Long enough for what?" Good question. Mara didn't have an answer. Then she saw Marcus moving, gesturing to his men. They were spreading out wider, circling the house, planning to hit from all sides at once. "They're flanking us," she called. "Gideon, watch the back." Already on it, Mara shifted to cover the south side of the house. Through the window, she saw 3 men approaching low and fast, using a shed for cover. She aimed, fired, missed, fired again, hit one in the leg. The other 2 kept coming. They reached the wall directly below her. She couldn't get an angle on them. Then she smelled it. Oil. They were dousing the house with lamp oil. "They're going to burn us out," she screamed. "I know!" Gideon's voice was strained. "Get downstairs, now!" Mara ran for the stairs. Below, she could see Gideon at the back door, firing methodically. Harlow was reloading her shotgun, her face set with grim determination. "The oil," Mara started. "I know," Harlow said. "They light it. We've got maybe 2 minutes before this whole place goes up." "So what do? We go out fighting." Harlow snapped the shotgun closed. "Or we surrender." "I'm not surrendering." "Then I guess we're dying." Harlow almost smiled. "Could be worse. At least we'll go out on our terms." The first flame appeared at the south corner of the house, then the east wall. Within seconds, fire was climbing the exterior, hungry and fast. Smoke began filling the interior. Mara's eyes watered, her lungs burned. "We have to move," Gideon shouted. "Front door, all of us, now." They regrouped at the entrance. Outside, Marcus's men waited, weapons ready. "This is it," Mara said. Gideon nodded. Harlow checked her ammunition one last time. Mara kicked the door open and they charged out into hell. Gunfire from every direction. Mara shot on instinct, not aiming, just firing into the mass of bodies. Someone screamed, someone fell. Could have been her shots, or Gideon's, or Harlow's, didn't matter. They fought through the first wave. Mara's rifle clicked empty. She dropped it, pulled a pistol from her belt, kept firing. A man rushed her from the side. She shot him twice. He kept coming. She shot him again, and he finally went down. Harlow's shotgun boomed. One of Marcus's guards disintegrated in a spray of blood. Gideon was hit. Mara saw him stumble, saw blood bloom on his shoulder, but he stayed standing, kept shooting. The tide was turning. They were losing. Then Mara saw him. Marcus Rourke, standing behind his men, watching the battle with cold calculation. She ran toward him. Bullets whipped past her head. Someone grabbed her arm, and she shot them without looking, kept running. Marcus saw her coming, drew a pistol from his coat. They fired at the same time. Mara felt something punch her in the side, hot and sharp. She stumbled but didn't fall. Marcus clutched his stomach, his face twisted in shock. They stood 10 feet apart, both wounded, both still standing. "You should have died in that cellar," Marcus gasped. "Yeah, I should have." Mara raised her pistol, her hand steady despite the blood running down her side. "But I didn't." She pulled the trigger. Marcus Rourke fell backward into the mud and didn't move. For a moment, everything stopped. The shooting ceased. Marcus's men stared at their fallen boss, then at Mara, then at each other. One of them dropped his weapon. Then another. Within seconds, they were all backing away, hands raised. "It's over," Mara said, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to them or to herself. "It's over." She turned to find Gideon and Harlow. They were both still standing, both bleeding, both alive. The house behind them was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the gray sky. Harlow watched it burn with an expression Mara couldn't read. 30 years, the doctor said quietly. All gone. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was just wood and nails. Harlow looked at Mara. This was worth it. The town emerged slowly from hiding. People gathered in the street, staring at the bodies, the burning house, the 3 survivors standing in the wreckage. The old man from the saloon approached, the one who'd told Mara where to find Marcus. He looked at the bodies, then at Mara. The Rourkes are done, he said. Both brothers dead. Their men scattered. After 30 years, they're finally done. Good, Mara said. Then her legs gave out and she sat down hard in the mud. Gideon collapsed beside her. Harlow knelt between them, checking their wounds with practiced efficiency. You're both bleeding, she said, but you'll live, assuming infection doesn't set in. We've survived worse, Gideon muttered. Have you? Because this is pretty bad. But they had survived. Against all odds, against all reason, they'd survived. The winter passed slowly. Mara and Gideon recovered in a boarding house paid for by the town, which apparently felt some collective guilt for standing by while the Rourkes terrorized the valley for 3 decades. Harlow moved in with another doctor on the far side of Ash Creek and started rebuilding her practice. She checked on Mara and Gideon daily, monitoring their wounds, making sure infection didn't take what bullets hadn't. By the time spring arrived, they were both mobile. Gideon walked with a limp he'd probably carry the rest of his life. Mara had a scar on her side that ached when it rained, but they were alive. One morning in early April, Gideon found Mara standing at the window, watching the snow melt in the streets. You thinking about leaving? He asked. Thinking about where to go next. Got any ideas? Few. There's a town called Silver Creek about 200 miles west. Heard they need a doctor. Harlow might be interested. And us? Mara turned to face him. I don't know what we are. Partners? Friends? Something else? Does it matter? Maybe not, she smiled. Long as we're something. They left Ash Creek a week later. Harlow came with them, her medical supplies packed on a mule, her shotgun within easy reach. The journey west took 3 weeks. They moved slowly, in no particular hurry, stopping when they wanted, sleeping under stars that were finally warm again. Silver Creek turned out to be a mining town, rough but growing. They needed a doctor desperately. Harlow set up shop in a building that had once been a saloon, and within a month she had more patients than she could handle. Mara and Gideon built a cabin on the edge of town, not as remote as the mountain, but private enough. They hunted, traded, helped Harlow when she needed extra hands. It wasn't the life Mara had imagined when she was locked in Silas Rourke's cellar. It wasn't the life she'd dreamed about during those long nights on the mountain. It was better, because it was hers. Chosen, not forced. Built, not inherited. One evening, sitting on the porch while the sun set over the western peaks, Gideon asked, You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't bid on you that day? Sometimes. What do you think? Mara considered. I think someone worse would have bought me. I think I probably would have died within a year. And I think I never would have known I could be this. This what? Free. Strong. Myself. She looked at him. What about you? You ever regret it? Bidding on you? Yeah. Gideon was quiet for a long time, then, best $10 I ever spent. Mara laughed. I'm worth at least 15 in current markets, probably 20. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared and the stars came out. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The sound didn't frighten Mara anymore. Nothing did. She'd survived 6 years in hell, escaped, fought back, and won. She'd killed the men who tried to own her. She'd built a life from nothing. The town of Ash Creek probably still told stories about her. The woman sold at auction who burned down the Rourke empire. The burden no man wanted who became the thing they feared. Let them talk. Mara didn't need their approval or their understanding. She had something better. She had a life that was entirely, completely, undeniably her own. And that was enough.